concert at Jones Beach in Long Island on July 1st, 1988, and that was a Bob Dylan concert. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you and Mr. Damiano went alone to the concert?
Yes.
And how did you get the tickets?
The tickets were complimentary from a man by the name of Anthony Tiller.
And how do you know the tickets were complimentary from Anthony Tiller?
Because my husband had spoken with Anthony Tiller on the telephone and made an arrangement that tickets would be given.
And you know that
concert.
I'm sorry, and you know that from what your husband told you and from also listening to your husband on the telephone, is that correct? Or just the first, not the second?
A little of both.
Okay, why don't you tell us how you know that the tickets
Well, I knew they were on
complimentary?
the telephone and having a conversation about this.
Okay. As you sit here today, do you remember that your husband was on the phone with Mr. Tiller in 1988?
Yes.
You have a picture of that happening in 1988?
Yes.
Okay. And before the concert, your husband didn't tell you, Mrs. Damiano, did he, that Tony Tiller had made arrangements for your husband to go backstage after the concert, did he?
I can't recall his exact words, but the feeling I had was that we were going to go to the concert and that the possibility was that we were going to be able to. My husband was asked to bring his lyric books with him.
Okay. You testified about a feeling you had and the possibility. My question to you was a narrower one, which is your husband didn't tell you that Mr. Tiller had made specific arrangements for him to go backstage after the concert, did he?
Not to my, not that I recall.
And your husband didn't tell you before the concert that Mr. Tiller had made arrangements for your husband to go backstage and meet Bob Dylan after the concert, did he?
Not those specific words, no.
Well, what words?
Well, that we would have tickets, complimentary tickets to go to the concert, and that we should, or Jim should, bring his lyrics with him.
Right, and my specific question, I understand that testimony, but my specific question is, your husband didn't tell you before the concert that Mr. Tiller had made arrangements for your husband to meet Bob Dylan after the concert?
No.
And where were your seats at the concert?
We were seated not on the lower deck. It seemed like it was an upper deck to the left-hand side of the stadium. I don't know if you want to call it a stadium or amphitheater or that type of setup. We were facing the stage. The stage was down below. There was one, maybe two tiers, and then we were up on an upper left-hand tier.
And how many other people were sitting in your row?
We were the only two.
Okay. And did either you or Mr. Damiano have songs with you at the concert?
Jim had songs.
And were they in a book or loose papers in an envelope?
Keep your voice up if you would. I know it's late, but...
Seems to me they were loose papers.
And did he have an envelope with him?
Yes.
And he didn't have any tapes with him, did he?
I'm not sure. I can't remember.
And do you know whether your husband kept a copy of the documents he had with him that day?
Yes.
Okay, do you know where those are?
No.
How do you know he kept a copy of them?
Well, I know from, I can't say, okay, let me rephrase that. I can't say exactly he did, but I know in most cases he does keep a copy of all his lyrics.
So you don't know today whether, in fact, he kept a copy of what he had there that day?
No.
Now, your husband, in his various statements that he has submitted, stated that you and he went backstage after the concert.
Correct.
And for a period of about 45 minutes waited until you allegedly saw Mr. Dillon. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Now I have some documents that I'd like to show you. Well, before I show you the documents, why don't you tell us what happened after the concert, as best as you can recall, on July 1st, 1988.
Right.
At Jones Beach.
Right. Okay. The concert finished. We walked outside. We walked over towards it seemed like a gate over to the side. The gate was locked. It was raining, started raining. There was a guard that came up to the gate. And after that, it seemed like the gate had been unlocked. We walked through this gate, walked down seemed like a long roadway that led around to the back of the stage area. When we walked back there, we were the only two back there. There was a platform, like a wooden platform that we sat down on, and Jim started to go through his various lyric pages, putting the best ones he felt on top. And I stood there. I stood up, and at that point, a man walked out of the back door, looked at us, looked at Jim, looked at I, and then he turned around and walked back in this back door. And then the door opened again, and a group of people walked out the back door. And as they started to walk, I looked up and I recognized a person, Bob Dylan. And I said to Jim, "There he is. There's Bob." And at that time, he was up to about the first step to the bus, the tour bus that they were walking to. And he stopped before he got onto the bus and took a step onto the bottom step, looked back at us, and by that time Jim had stood up, started to walk over towards him. Mr. Dillon started to walk back, and another person walked in between the two of them and put down his arm. And then it seemed like, I couldn't hear exactly what was being said, but it seemed like someone said, what are you doing here, or what is this? And Jim handed the book, started to hand the book to him, and then someone else came over and took the lyric, whether it was a book or an envelope with the lyrics in it, took this package and walked towards the bus along with the other people, and they all got onto the bus, the door closed, and the bus drove away.
And is that as best as you can recall what happened backstage on July 1st?
Yes.
And your husband, as I said, withdrawn. Let me show you some statements now.